everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. This is episode 102, by the way. My name is Boris. I'm the founder of 356 Labs, and this one will be a different one. It will be a mix of some top moments from various guests on the topic of storytelling, a hot topic. The reason why we decided to do it, if we have to be super honest, is because we didn't have the time to invite another guest for you, because we're extremely busy with the preparation of the biggest presentation skills conference on the planet called Present to Succeed. So if you still don't know about it, check it out. And until then, I'm leaving you to hear some of the indeed truly best moments on the topic of storytelling, starting with someone that was one of our speakers last year at Present to Succeed and will be a speaker again this year in April 7th. On April 7th. His name is Kendall. He is one of probably the most prolific neuroscientists on the topic, and he discusses only the topic of storytelling. So hear that part from our episode like 6 months ago, when he was talking about what the word storytelling actually means, what is actually story, and a little bit more of his thoughts around what is the importance of tension in the context of storytelling.
I want to kind of probably start from a lot of people use the word storytelling, but are they using it correctly? What do they mean? What are you seeing there?
Let me change the word correctly to constructively.
Okay.
People have used the word story and storytelling for millennia.
Okay.
First, take the word storytelling.
Okay.
There are two halves to that word. Story is a noun. Story is a thing. It's a physical asset. Companies should treat the word story like they treat any other valuable asset. You can hoard it, save it, sell it, rent it, invest in it. It is an incredibly effective stories are an incredibly valuable company asset.
Okay.
Telling is a verb. It's an interactive process. Many people think, well, if I put it on a video or if I write it in an article, no, it's not really interactive. It never changes. But what does change is each individual's experience of receiving the story. So that the process of conveying a story, that is to say the telling part, is always an instantaneous, interactive process.
Okay.
The two are totally separate. The concerns, the issues, the variables at your control when you're developing story are different than those that you use and are concerned with when you work on the telling side. They're both important, but they are separate. Now,
okay,
when we use the word story, most people think of things that begin with once upon a time, or things that are childish or for children.
Yeah.
People often think of story as being fiction.
Okay.
None of those are true. People have been trying to define story, those who write stories, for thousands of years. What occurred to me and what I was able to research was not trying to define story by looking at stories.
Yeah.
But define story by what happens inside the mind of the person who receives the story.
Yeah.
If you're trying to tell a story, especially for a purpose, part of either internal or external for your company, you always have a purpose. There's something you're trying to do. You're trying to exert influence. You're trying to change someone's behavior, change their attitudes, beliefs, their values. And all that matters to accomplish that is what happens inside the head of the person who receives the story. Then we have to know, well, why hasn't the character already achieved their goal?
Yep.
There has to be something that stands between them and their goal. Problems and conflicts. general term, obstacles. A conflict is something that involves direct opposition to some other entity in the story. A problem is something like, I want to go to the store and the store is 2 blocks away. Well, 2 blocks away, technically, is a problem. Why? Because in this moment, it's keeping me from being at the store. Okay.
Yep.
Problems can be simple. They can be incredibly complex and almost impossible to overcome. We, generally speaking, are more engaged by, or more easily engaged by, conflicts than by problems. It's not a sure thing. The reason is that conflicts more easily create what creates excitement, what controls tension in the story. And as the saying is, as goes tension, so goes attention.
Yeah, that one is a big one. As goes tension,
So goes
so goes
attention.
attention. That is a big one.
And so there is always tension in a story. There has to be something. We have to be worried about, oh, what's going to happen, or how are they going to get that? How are they going to get that? There has to be some story question that is on our minds that creates some attention in order to hold our attention and keep us engaged. The thing that does that is risk and danger. Two separate, very tightly related elements. Risk is the likelihood that something's going to go wrong, the probability of failure. Danger is what happens to a character if something goes wrong. It's the consequences of failure. At every moment, we as human beings are taught almost from birth to be aware of risk and danger. You stand on a street corner, you look both ways. Why? You want to reduce the risk of getting flattened by a huge delivery truck that's zipping down the road at 80 kilometers an hour, right?
Yeah.
If you see one, you think, the likelihood of me getting flattened here and dying on the street is pretty high, so I'll wait on the curb.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the danger, it reduces the risk. What we find is that mathematically, and I won't go into math a lot as we talk today, but this is one that just blew my mind. If you put risk and danger on scales of 0 to 1, moment to moment, and calculate them and multiply them together, risk times danger, that product, and graph that product, it tracks exactly with engagement and with tension in a story for target audiences.
Wow, okay.
And the cool news is, at any moment, even improvisationally in a presentation, if you think you're starting to lose the audience, all you have to do is remind them of what could go wrong, what's at risk here, and how likely it is that something could go wrong.
That's a very interesting one.
Those elements are always there.
As goes tension, there goes attention. So our role is to create tension and then release it, right? Write that down. Now, let's move on to our second cut. Let's call it a cut. From another speaker from our conference. His name is Florian Mueck. His session, by the way, last year was rated as #1 session at the event. I want you to hear what Florian has to say about the topic of storytelling and how he emphasizes the importance of being super, super specific when we're telling stories to our audience.
Okay. We are incapable of giving specific examples. It's crazy. People speak generically all the time. All the time. I went to many cities. I lived in many cities. I went to many countries. I love food. I had a normal childhood. It goes in, out, adios amigo. It's not sticky. It's not memorable. It's not emotional. It's nothing. So you need to give examples. And examples are like onions.
Okay.
You peel them and peel them and peel them. I went to many cities like New York and Brooklyn and that museum, and I met this girl, and there, and the kiss on Brooklyn Bridge, where you cannot walk. You see, this is an onion. You have to give examples to be sticky with people. And that's why I love so much, and here I stop, that you call your one trait, you call it story.
Yep.
You know that exemplum, my session is on rhetorical devices, by the way. An exemplum comes from this, is an example, an anecdote, or story to make a moral point. This is where it comes from. But if you don't have examples, anecdotes, or story, you cannot make a moral point, and you cannot say, I lived in many cities. There is no point. So give examples. The biggest thing for me in terms of content, the biggest improvement right away, stop talking generically. Generically means I have good clients. We create value for our clients. We create a win-win situation. All this business bullshit bingo, the bullshit bingo in business that I played so well for almost a decade, forget it. Stop talking generically. Give specific examples, because they are sticky and it's an onion. Go deep, man. Give more details. Talk in examples, and people will understand you, and they will memorize what you say.
So, generic sucks, specific rocks, as Florian says. Now let's move on to another friend of ours. She was also a speaker in our conference, our first edition of the conference, presented to CEAT in April 2021. Her name is Verineia Codrean, and she will be talking, and you will hear her talking about personal storytelling, but also how you can incorporate storytelling on a company level. So let's hear Verineia.
Yeah, so what I wanted to talk today would be two major things. One would be about your personal story, how you can nail that idea, and why is that important to be able to tell your story in a very short, concise way on a personal level. And of course, the brand or the company story.
Okay.
Which one would you like to start with?
I mean, people are individuals, so I believe the listeners are, first of all, individuals, I think. So let's start from the personal one.
Yeah, very good. So one idea is that in order for people to remember you, or people to really have a great impression of you, it is not about you telling them that you are hardworking, for instance, or you have these characteristics, or like basically your life story, because nobody, one, has time, and second, people are selfish at the end of the day. So one of the ways, of course, to be memorable, it's one, to come up with a story that actually tells those things for you. This is also something that comes from copywriting, when it's an element that is called show, don't tell, meaning don't tell someone that you are hardworking, for instance, or that you are bold, or that you are brave, or you are creative, you know.
You're a genius.
Exactly. show them. And in copywriting, that's something that you show them through an example. And in personal storytelling, there is a really cool exercise that summarizes this, is that when you think of yourself, you need to think of yourself as, okay, Boris is blank, 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 and is not blank. So you pick three characteristics, and then you think of three stories that will illustrate that. And the great test to show if you are able to do that is to just tell somebody that didn't meet you or didn't know that about you, and tell that short story and see, do they leave with the impression that you have that characteristic? Let's say you are creative or you are bold. Can you explain and think of a short story from your personal or professional experience that shows this quality? Because a lot of times when, for instance, when it comes to personal storytelling, when we go to an interview, let's say, or when you go to a VC to tell them about your startup, it does come a time when you need to talk about yourself. So rather than saying, you know, that I am brave, or I like to take challenges, you know, or I'm a team player, don't fall into the cliche trap or just enumerating those things about you. Think of a short form of an example, of a short anecdote from your life, professional, personal, that illustrates that point about you. And that is going to be something that is going to help somebody even be able to memorize that about you. So nobody, if I tell you that, Boris, I am very creative, will you remember this about me? No. but like, let's say a year from now, right? But if I'm telling you like this story about me, and how I was able to turn something around that was not like possible, and I use my creativity to do that, that story is going to help you remember about that quality of mine. And
Yep.
that, when it comes to storytelling, that's what it is. Even our our meeting, is like both foodies, and that story is going to be tied up to the way we met each other. And that is, I know you being a foodie and somebody who loves great taste, great food, and like
I
you
agree.
so that's one of the things.
Let's go for the company
Let's
level
go for the
storytelling.
company one.
What
So
happens there?
in here, it's very interesting that the one-line storytelling part, it's on one hand very hard to nail, because you think, how do I put my company that is like, I don't know, for 10 years on the market to be fitted in one liner? And on the other hand, when you have the formula, it's so damn easy that it's almost like striking you, I was not aware of this before. So in very, very interesting way, it's how you explain your business in 30 seconds, or like a minute or less than a minute, in making it clear and interesting. That's the premise of it, that we go. Because both you and I would work with so many brilliant businesses, and yet they are so bad at explaining what they do. They would ramble on and on until you, at the end, you are not even sure what this company is doing, or like they do so many things that you are even more confused than you started. So the formula is very easy, and we're gonna go step by step. There are 3 main ideas to it.
Okay.
So first, you share in very simple terms what is the problem that most people have in the business area that you are dealing with.
Yeah.
The next step, you offer a very simple solution. And the next one is, what is the happy ending that the customer gets out of that? It is so that simple. And we're going to go through all 3 of this to see an example. And the one that actually, because Zara was just in the background, we'll take like a pet food company just to explain it. So the first would be that, following this formula, because all the time, for examples, it's much more clear. When you have a puppy, like you have Zara, so you care for her a lot, right? So as a pet owner, right, you think, what is the problem that a lot of people face in this? Pet owners are worried, what are their pets really eating, right? Like, what is the nutrition that they're getting? That's the problem, right?
Yep.
The second one is explain. So that would be the first, the most people have this problem. So in this example, is most pet owners are worried, what are their pets really eating? The next one, offer a solution as a business that you cater to that idea. So we source our food from local trusted vendors.
Yep.
And this is one that addresses the very, very simple. So we are really stripping it down to the most simple way. So it's talking about some locally trusted vendors that where you source your food from. And the third one is the result, which would be that ensures that your pet stays happy and healthy. So let's take this in one. So if you are a pet company that sells nutrition for animals, in this case for dogs, it will be the way you talk about your business in a one-liner, without and this way you strip all the unnecessary elements, would be in this way, for following this formula. Pet owners are worried, most pet owners are worried, what are their pets really eating? We are sourcing our food from local trusted vendors. So you are sure that your pet stays happy and healthy. So in here, with this one-liner, you are able to communicate directly to the problem that your ideal customer is facing. The second, you give the very simple solution. And then later on, you will talk about all the nutritional benefits, all on and so forth. But how do you communicate that in a one powerful liner? And that is the example that came just from our live interaction. But the example, for instance, the client that I was mentioning before, it was the investment fund that they are working, with a lot of investment, a lot of things that are a little bit less known or a little bit less understood. So being this investment platform, I will pick from what we work with them. It was following the same exact formula, that you can, of course, add to the more complex your business is. But most people keep hearing about stocks and see cryptocurrency rising in price.
Okay.
That's the first part, right?
Yep.
The second part is, so that was the problem that people in their niche are facing. The second one is present a super simple solution.
Okay.
So we created a fun, easy to understand platform with all investment stock and cryptocurrency information that you need. And what is the end solution that people get? Instead of rambling and getting confused by stock information, you are secured with every investment that you made. So this creates something that, be it at a conference where you meet somebody and you have just like this coffee break where, oh, what do you do? What do you do? You don't have the time of going to all the details and jargon of the industry. Or when somebody would become your customer, oh, wait a second. I keep hearing about this cryptocurrency and Bitcoin going up and down, but I feel very confused about it. And the more you want these people as your clients, but this is something that they only heard barely, or keep hearing like these speculations, or keep seeing, this very a lot of information that is a lot of jargon that they don't understand, and they would rather say, I would rather better stay away from it and keep my money safe, right? So you, by taking and eliminating all the jargon and following this very easy 3-step formula, are able to drag through it any single business, from the most simple, as I said, local store, to a very complex financial system, to explain what do you do, so any regular customer can understand what you do and eventually become your customer.
Problem, simple problem, simple explanation of the problem, simple, very straight to the point solution. And then how would you feel when you get the result? How would you?
Exactly. How powerful this one-liner can become. And not only, but this can be something that will sell by yourself, your company, without you actually coming across very pushy or very self-promoting. It's very easy. You dive into a very simple problem with a very easy solution, with a great outcome that the customer actually need, that they even didn't know that they might need. And that comes with the personal storytelling as well, because a lot of people are thinking that this is a very high level, only when you come to a C level, let's say, position is when you need to start learning public speaking skills or storytelling skills, and that is not true. This is actually what is going to get you through the door into getting into those high level positions, into those opportunities, because when you have people that are equally qualified like you, that have the same experience like you, the only way for you to stand out is to come up with a better story.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. I mean, everyone, especially for the, how can I say it, higher level positions and the most boutique companies and most interesting positions, is constantly trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves so that they stand out from everyone else. Like I remember when Eva, I don't know if you know her, my girlfriend, when she was applying, now she works with us obviously, but when she was applying for a very big company here in Bulgaria that later on became, they were purchased by another organization. So but they were one of those, sexy organizations to work for in Bulgaria. So when she was applying, she was like 21, just 21. And she was applying for the HR role. It's not a senior director partner role, but still the HR, like not junior HR, but the HR role in that organization. And she was 21. She had this internship in Nestle before that. And I said, hey, in order for you to do that, and bear in mind, like this is 7 or 8 years ago, like that is, okay, 6 or 7. So 6 or 7 years ago, I told her, if you want to even have a chance, right, to compare with the big girls, big boys there, which are probably 25, 30-year-olds, 35 for that role, you have to do something that no one else is going to do, right? I mean, there is no other way for me to put it, right? So what we ended up doing is we went outside. Again, this is 7 years ago, not today. 7 years ago, we went outside and we recorded a professional video for less than a minute, why she thinks she's the best fit for that organization, right? 7 years ago. Take that in mind. So that one, by the way, got her through all of the interviews up until the latest, like the last interview. So she went through all of them just because of that video, you know? And
Fantastic.
just because no one else who got interviewed sent this company a video that's less than a minute, where for 1 minute you have exactly what you need to say to grab their attention, keep it there, and kind of stick in their brains, you know, make a mark in their brains. So I completely agree with what you're saying, that everyone has to think about how can they differentiate so that they get what they want to get, to be honest.
Exactly. So first of all, when you mentioned Eva, I am deeply offended. If you ask me if I know her, she's a superstar and we've met in Stockholm. So yes, I
That
know
is the
her.
case.
Yes,
That
and
is the
I
case.
am
I'm
deeply
sorry.
offended that you even ask if I know her. Of course, I know her, and I
Yeah,
love her.
that is
She's
true. I now remember.
amazing, amazing. And I'm very glad you shared this story because she even actually told me a little bit about that story when we met for dinner. Then with you
Really?
as well, yes, for the HR part. But I absolutely love it, and that comes to the idea closing with the personal story of that client of mine. She got the job, even if it was something she never did it, in this VC fund that was just around investing only in AI technology startups. So it was something outside of her interest, but because she came in with that really innovative way of grabbing the attention and through a storytelling loop format email, she grabbed the attention, she got the interview. Of course, it was important to have the skills, but when everybody else is on the same level, she got picked up because she was the one that was the memorable one, is the one that stays in their attention, either through the example that you gave of Eva's 1 minute, powerful story, or the one that I mentioned. It's very, very important. And that's why, as a conclusion, what I would like everyone not to try, but to do. Because when you try, you put it for later and you forget it or you think it's not for you. To do. One exercise for the personal story. Think of 3 things that you want people to know you as. Meaning 3 qualificatives, 3 things that you want yourself to be characterized, and think of 3 examples that show that. Not tell that you are bold or that you are empathic or you are creative, but that show that quality of yours, and strip them down and make them super short, that when it comes to tell us about yourself, you are able in 3 sentences to tell about 3 quality of yours, not naming them, but only showing them through a clear example. So think of this on a personal example. And on the company side, work on the exercise of describe your company in this very, very simple 3 steps formula, and think of your story company in this way. First, most people struggle with, and then describe the problem that the people in your niche, in your industry are struggle with. So that's the formula. Most people struggle with, and describe the problem. So we created and then describe the solution in a very, very simple format. So you then can and describe the ideal result of them implementing this service or product of yours. And this is the super short, sweet idea that people can work with.
Okay, so now let's move on to another friend of ours who also runs a presentation agency, but in the UK. His name is Morton, and I want you to hear him speak about the importance of the story itself. Many people focus on the design, many people focus on the visuals, on the PowerPoints, on the keynotes, on the pitch.coms, or whatever it may be. But the story is the most important thing here. And if you think about it, the visuals support the story. So take a listen of what Simon has to say about that topic.
Okay, so let's go back to what we were planning to do in regards to this podcast and what you more or less started with. And I would say that it's very interesting that you said that your company moved and transformed into more or less story. You approached it first from the design perspective, and then you said, well, wait a minute, I'm spending more time on the stories with our customers. We actually experienced the same. It's funny that we were called a presentation design agency. And then after our first project with Deutsche Telekom, we became presentation agency.
Really?
Because
Okay, that's
the
interesting.
design was not the problem. Like, it needed to be improved, but the problem was the story.
Yeah.
And you are super, like, you are very much into stories and into storytelling people who are listening to this podcast are business professionals, obviously some designers, of course, but what should they know about story and storytelling?
It's interesting that we've both been on that same journey, because you're absolutely right. And I can't profess to have been clever enough at the start of the whole process to go, it's all about story. So I was pulled in, just like you, by companies saying, we've got a problem. And if I can tell you a very quick story to explain the power of story. I won't name their names, but it's actually in the book as a sort of a case study. Many years ago. I mean, I don't think I'd even officially started the business. It was kind of a paid hobby. And I had a really awful looking website. And I was amazed. One day I got a phone call through the website, and it was a really large hotel chain, huge global hotel chain. And I had the brief conversation with them, and they said, look, we've got our presentation, our agency's worked on it, and we're still not happy. You're the expert. Have a look at it and tell us, sort of what you would change. And so I said, yeah, absolutely. Just email it over, and I'll have a look at this a little bit. We can't email it over. It's too big. We'll get it biked over to your studio. Well, at this point, I didn't have a studio. I had my back bedroom. So I called my wife. I said, there'll be a bike courier turning up at home in the next half hour. Can you look businesslike when you answer the phone, when you answer the door? Why the courier would mind, I've no idea. But anyway, I finally get back home from my paid job, and the package is waiting for me there. And I open this CD-ROM. It's so long ago. Yeah. CD-ROM up, and this thing was a work of art. The packaging was beautiful. I put the CD in, and the screen lit up, and it was just the most glorious looking presentation you've ever seen. Look, transitions were out of this world. Everything looked great. And my wife was looking over my shoulder. She went, wow, that looks beautiful. You've never done anything that looks that good. I went, oh, thank you, dear. So this is really going well. I'm thinking, okay, I've got nothing I can add here. And then I took a step back and I looked at the presentation, and it was all about them. It was all about, the first 5 slides, I kid you not, were pictures of their executive board. Beautifully shot pictures, and they looked lovely on screen, but it was all about, this is how great we are. This is how big we are. Look at all of the hotels we have all over the world. So it was then I went, okay, looks fantastic. I can't add anything in terms of look and feel, but this story is awful. And so I prepared for the meeting, and I went along, and I thought I was just meeting with the marketing director. And it was going to be a cozy conversation over a coffee. And I got to the big reception, and they said, he popped out, lovely man. And he said, Simon, thanks very much. The other guys are just finishing up, and then you're on. I thought, what? He said, you're going to present back your thoughts and ideas to the team. I was like, okay. Well, my first point was lose the pictures of the middle-aged guys at the start of the presentation. They need to be pushed towards the back. So I walk into this room, and they're in there like a horseshoe. There are about 20 of them, and I recognize all of them because those are the guys that were the pictures in the presentation. And I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, which is an English saying of going, you might as well just go for it. I said, and they said, if you could set up and show us your artwork, that would be great. I didn't have any artwork to share. So I just said, look, I think your biggest problem has nothing to do with design. It's all to do with story. Silence. I said, for example, the first 4 or 5 slides of your presentation are pictures of you guys. Now, don't get me wrong. It's important they know that they're dealing with serious people, but don't lead with that. Silence. And I thought, okay, I'm just digging a hole here. So I'll just keep digging. And about 5 minutes in, the biggest, scariest guy right in the middle, obviously the big boss, slammed down his fist. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is when I get thrown out. And he said, and I won't repeat the language. He said, thank goodness for that. Finally, somebody has figured out what's wrong with this presentation. He said, I've sat through 3 meetings today where people have talked about what they can do with our branding and what have you. He said, none of that makes a difference unless we have a great story. You've nailed it. When can you start? And I didn't show a single slide. Thank goodness, because I wouldn't have got the job if I had, because my own designs were awful. But the power of somebody going, that's it. We can look the most beautiful piece of work, but if all they remember is how pretty the slides were, but not how powerful the story was or what the key message was, then you got a problem.
Next up, a friend of ours whose name is Rob Willis. Rob made a very interesting point and gave a super practical tip for everyone who was listening to his episode back then. We extracted that moment for you, so take a listen and write that down. And what's more, I would say start using his advice immediately.
One thing I'll say which will work universally in this case is about stories. The worst time to be looking for one is when you need a story. So if you can develop a habit of writing down and collecting stories in your everyday life and spending 5 minutes on this every couple of days, you'll have a bank of stories and you'll be able to draw from that easily.
Yeah, completely agree. Have something like a journal, or I use OneNote, for example. People use Evernote. Some write in a notebook. Like that is the advice. Like collect those stories. Like that is, yeah, completely agree.
Ready to collect the stories and create a bank full of stories for your presentations? I really hope so. We personally do it at 356 Labs. So if we're doing it, why don't you do it? Anyhow, it's your choice at the end of the day. Now let's move on to another great moment from our podcasts on the topic of storytelling, this time with Andrea Sampson, who will tell you more about why do we even love stories? Like what's wrong with us? What's happening with us? Why our brains are wired in such a way that we just love listening to stories. So listen to what Andrea has to say on the topic.
Now, let's jump, because we can obviously talk about that part for hours. Storytelling. Why should people care? Why should people push themselves to master that skill?
So storytelling is one of those things that we as humans, first of all, we just do it naturally. We, listen to our language. Our language is imbued with metaphor, which is really story. So we love story. And why do we love story? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. First of all, it connects us. Stories are meta stories. So every story that's ever been told, we all have some connection to it, and we've all had some experience of it. So you could be telling me the most insane story, and somewhere in my life, I've had components of that. And so while your story is always going to be your story, I am connecting to it as a human who has lived a life. And so we mirror each other. And this is where it comes into brain science. Our brains love story because our brains are two things. They're predictive and they're associative. So our brain is always trying to predict what's coming next. So in a story, it's kind of having fun. It's getting excited about, oh, I think I know what's coming. We're always trying to predict it. And the second thing is it's associative. It needs to have other things to associate to so it remembers. And so when we've got a complex idea that we're trying to get people to remember, wrapping it in story is a great way to get them to remember it. We're giving them an association. And there's been tons of stories done tons of research done on what happens in the brain when it's listening to story. And what's happening is it's exciting all of the sensory cortexes of the brain. And so we're seeing the brain light up, whether it's, from talking about smelling something or hearing something or seeing something. All of those parts of our brain are getting excited. So imagine that in terms of the brain having all of these different ways to associate an idea. If you're telling facts, and data, we're really only exciting the frontal cortex, the sort of the frontal lobes of the brain. That's where facts and data are held. And it's actually in language processing. That's what we're doing. We're going to language processing, and it's not enough for the brain to recall it. So if you want your audience to be engaged, to understand, to connect, to find ways to be interested, stories are the ways in which we do it. You know, when I started Talk Boutique, one of the, I was kind of giving some lots of thought to what it was we were actually doing with people. I had spent about 4 years working with TED speakers at that point, and was sort of giving some thought to it. And I came up with this Venn diagram that helps to understand, and I call it from idea to impact. And the first circle, imagine a Venn diagram. The first circle is story. And the second circle is idea, and you've got an intersection. And so what happens is when you take an idea, as all TED Talks have an idea, and you wrap it in story, what happens is you create engagement, interest, people lean in. Now, if you only have story and idea, what happens is it kind of ends there, right? So we sit at our computer, we watch a TED Talk, or we watch an interesting video, and it's interesting. And we're kind of interested. And if we do nothing more with it, nothing happens, right? We just have that knowledge. Where it gets interesting is when you add the third circle, which is conversation or engagement. And you started this off by talking about the tagline that I've got on there, which is about, we are the sum total of every conversation we've ever had. And I truly, truly believe that. Because what I know is that those stories and that have been wrapped in ideas get activated when you add conversation. Because what happens is you and I may have watched the same video, the same TED Talk. When we talk about it, what we learn is what we took away was different. You have one understanding of it. I have another understanding of it. When we speak, we get a shared understanding. And it's a different understanding than the one that either of us had before that conversation. So we now have connected in a new way. And we've connected with that idea in a new way. And when you have that engagement and you have understanding and you have connection, what you do is you create impact. Because now that idea, which came along with the story, right? Because that's what we weren't talking about the idea. We were actually talking about the story. And that's what gets us talking. The idea comes along for the ride because stories are like Trojan horses for ideas.
All right. So that being said, so to keep it a little bit more practical, also in that segment about storytelling, please advise everyone that's listening, what are the most fundamental things that they need to work on to make sure that they're going to tell an engaging story? Like, what do they need to know and then do to make sure that the story that they're going to tell is an engaging and memorable one?
So knowing that there's brain science behind it and knowing that you want people to remember your ideas. So number one, have an idea. So before you even start telling your story, know why you're telling it. So have a point. So that's number one. The next thing is, because we know that the brain gets engaged through sensory information, build your story using the senses. So if you're going to tell us a story, start off with, where are you physically? Are you in a forest? Is it a cold day? Is the snow gently falling? Can you smell the pine? Okay, now, right now, you're in that forest with me, aren't you? Your brain has taken you there. So build the story through the senses. Bring us exactly to where you are. Excite the senses with words that give us that. So the smell of pine, the feeling of cold on our skin, the sound of birds chirping. As you bring people in now, don't forget you've got characters. Now, what's happening? Why are you telling us this story? Now, every good storyteller does one more thing, and it's in every movie we've ever watched, which is the raising of the stakes. It's the and then moment. Create tension. So when you're telling a story, you start with the environment. You go to the characters. You then tell us why you're telling us this story. Then you have that and then moment, that raising of the stakes. And then you go to the conclusion, which leads to the idea you want us to remember.
All right. So if they just follow those few things, and I totally love the idea about just all of those. I like the definition of Kendall Heaven, who is so much in the storytelling world. He defines one of the components of engaging stories as sensory details. This is exactly what you're pointing to, and more or less describing the scene, describing what you're hearing, feeling, smelling, etc. All those things with words or with the visual support also, right? You can use the slides or the visual support that you have.
But say it. But
anything.
The more you say it, have both. It's a see and say. Like, as if you have slides, and you might have a beautiful slide up there of a winter scene. They'll tell us the voice connects us.
Yeah.
And from here, we're going to another fantastic guest. Her name is Orsolya Nemes, and she will tell you a little bit more about what storytelling. Again, we're going to go back again to the topic of what is truly storytelling and how it can be incorporated in the world of presentations. Hint here, it's about the structure of the message. So listen to what Orsolya has to say here.
You are super passionate about the world of storytelling. Obviously, storytelling is a little bit of a buzzword nowadays. Everyone in every industry, on every level is using the word storytelling. Why, in your opinion, is storytelling so important?
Yeah, it's exactly what I think, that it's a buzzword now, and I think storytelling is a bit overused, and I don't like to think it about that way. What I see is a lot of times when I talk about storytelling or mention storytelling, people are like, oh, come on, oh no, I have to just, go really deep down and see how I fared and how I got up and do some motivational stuff, and I'm not good at that, and I don't want to do that. And I always tell them that, this is not what you have to do. So it's not about a kind of motivational speaking or you have to share really intimate stories. So it's not about them. For me, storytelling is much more a tool, or it's a kind of process, how you think about what you have to say. I think storytelling is full of tools, and it's a very nice toolbox, and it helps you with structuring your thoughts. It helps you with coloring your ideas, and that's what I like to do. So I read a lot. I've always been reading a lot, and I think storytelling helps you to find really good analogies, metaphors. You can express yourself much better. Or if you build up your whole structure, it is basically, a form of story. I mean, I'm not the first person telling you this on this podcast. I think it's a very important and very useful tool, and very, very easy to use if you think think about storytelling in the terms of being a tool and not, something you deliver.
And one final cut from another incredible guest who was also now part of our conference the first year. He was a guest in the first edition of the conference. His name is Alexei Kapterev. If you don't know that name, by the way, Google him, all right? And you will find something quite interesting about him. Anyhow, what is Alexei about to tell you in the next few minutes? He is going to question, and he's going to push the discussion around why storytelling can be dangerous. All right, why storytelling can be dangerous. We intentionally left this one for the last thing in this episode, so take a listen.
You said something like, I'm looking at my notes for everyone on YouTube or whatever. You said something that when a presentation contains stories, it has to be labeled with a sign that says warning, stories included. Tell us more. What's going on?
Basically, there are three problems with stories. Number one, they are polarizing, because this is just how stories work. You can't have a story without the villain and the hero. There's always somebody's responsible for, somebody's guilty of something, and so stories can make us assign blame, which is not always helpful. There's stories are about black and white, basically. trying to sort the world into the goodies and the baddies. And this is not always how the world works. Well, sometimes this is exactly how the world works. If we are, I don't know, talking about the World War II, this was pretty much how things unfolded. But a lot of things in the world are not so clear cut. They are not that black and white. And stories make people think that they are. And this, I believe, is one of the sort of cognitive biases that psychotherapy tries to alleviate, because depressed people tend to think in those, black and white terms. It's either or. It's catastrophizing, and if you don't do this, you're doomed. And this is how stories work. One of the Russian masters of storytelling, a guy called Arif Aliyev, said once that a hero should have a problem he cannot live with. So it should be that bad, and this is how stories work. If it's not bad enough, nobody cares. So we make it bigger than it actually is. We create more contrast. So problem number one. Problem number two, that which is more or less the same problem, that it's oversimplification. Most of the time, it's oversimplifying things. Again, the world is complex and multifaceted, and sometimes there are numerous causes of the event, and the stories just can't handle this complexity. There should be one clear cause. Why did this happen? This is why. We know who the culprit is. So polarizing, simplifying, and finally they produce motivation, which is a good thing. If supposedly people lack motivation, you need to sort of infuse some motivation in them. This is good, but then if you have stupid and polarized people and you tell them a story, does it do any good? Question remains. And sometimes it kind of does, but sometimes things might go astray. So yeah, basically 3 points.
Okay, that's it for today, everyone. Hopefully you took some ideas from those incredible guests that we had on an otherwise incredibly important and super popular nowadays topic called storytelling. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to the podcast or to the channel if you are watching this on YouTube, and you know how it goes. Every share, like, and comment matters, and we appreciate it highly. Thanks again, and see you soon.